We're going to jump into some trade rumors, some trade targets for the Browns in just a moment. But first, if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so because we have been growing like crazy here at the channel. YouTube lets me know how many subscribers we get in the last 28 days. We're over 1,500. So join nearly 1,500 strong in just the last month and help us reach 14,000 subscribers before Week 6 kicks off. What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Cleveland Browns Report by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here with some trades because it is trade season, baby. NFL trade deadline is creeping up on us. It is November 1st. And so we're going to run through some trade targets / trade rumors surrounding your Cleveland Browns. Now, before we look at any names, I think it's important to get some of the facts down and kind of set the scene for us here. If a trade's going to happen, it's going to go through this man, Andrew Berry. And I think it's important to see what Andrew Berry has done as a general manager. Michael, I see you. Berry has been an aggressive GM. He has made 14 trades by my calculations, and we know he's been aggressive, right? He went out and got Deshaun Watson. He has been no stranger to making trades, all right? The Browns have 8 picks. We'll look at those in just a second. So they do have some pieces to move around if they do feel like they need to make an adjustment this year. The needs, they are what they always have been. Defensive line, specifically defensive tackle, and wide receiver, in my opinion. Here are those picks for the Cleveland Browns in 2023. Remember, the Deion Jones trade was 2024 assets, so that does not impact what the Browns have to work with this year. No first rounder, that belongs to the Texans. They have a second. They have a comp pick coming over from the NFL after Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was hired by the Vikings GM. A Vikings fourth from a trade last year. The Rams for the Troy Hill trade, yada, yada, yada. All right, with that all being said, let's get into the meat right this, right? Trade targets, starting with Robert Quinn. I didn't expect the Browns to ever really be a player to be going after Robert Quinn because they have Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. So why would they go out and get a player who had 18.5 sacks last year when they're pretty good at that spot? Well, here's why. Bleacher Report picked the Browns as a trade destination. Now, we know that the Bears have been shopping Quinn for quite some time, really since the new regime with Ryan Poles came into town. But they have not gotten the offer they have liked, and they've opted to hold on to him and look to probably pull off a midseason trade. Now, we're filming this after or during our live show every Thursday. Bears play Thursday night against the Commanders, so just hopefully Quinn doesn't tear his ACL tonight. But 6 tackles, 1 sack, and 5 pressures. Now, let's look and see what Bleacher Report said about the Browns, saying, teams haven't been particularly pass-heavy against Chicago this season, which has limited Quinn's opportunities. The Bears have had the second fewest passes thrown against them, 143, in the NFL this season. Quinn's $12.8 million base salary isn't outlandish, and there's a real chance that he could regain his 2021 form with a different squad. The Cleveland Browns should consider adding Quinn to their rotation, especially since they're one of the few teams that could afford to add him outright. So let's remember what Christopher from Bleacher Report just said. Last year with the Bears, Robert Quinn casually putting up an empty 18.5 sack season. I feel like that got lost on because the Bears were so trash, but he had a phenomenal year. Now, what I did find interesting was what Bleacher Report said about adding Quinn to the rotation. You don't trade for a guy like Robert Quinn to be in the rotation. That's a starting defensive end. So I think if they actually did pull off a trade like this, we'd see a lot more looks of Garrett, Clowney, and Quinn all on the field at the same time. Now, Garrett's a defensive end, and Robert Quinn really isn't all that much help against the run. Clowney is the best run stopper of those 3. So I could see them kind of bouncing him on the inside with Taven Bryan and rolling that way. I think that would be your best possible lineup on maybe obvious passing situations, 3rd and long, right? Where you want to get your 3 best down linemen on the field, so you move Clowney on the inside. Okay, so with that all in mind, I want you guys to take control of the show right now by letting me know what you would do about this trade. Would you do it? I've got the Bears getting a 3rd rounder. Keep in mind that means the Browns, who do not have a first, will just have a second for days 1 and day 2 in exchange for Robert Quinn. A third rounder might not cut it. It might take a third and an additional day 3 pick, but let's just keep it simple right now. Y for yes or N for no. Would you do this trade for Robert Quinn? All right, let's move on to our next trade target. In fact, we can bundle these two. It's Denzel Mims and it's Terrance Marshall Jr. from the Carolina Panthers. 2 second-round picks that have not worked out for their respective teams here. When you look at their career stats, it's pretty empty. One, Denzel Mims has played 0 snaps this year. He has been a healthy scratch all year long for the Jets. Meanwhile, for Carolina, there's 2 big reasons why Marshall may be on the move. One, he hasn't really looked like a second-round pick. Just 21 receptions in a season and change at 168 yards. 2, the Panthers firing Matt Rule gives off a vibe of it is yard sale time. Just have your pick of the litter. Gut us clean here. We're already short draft capital after the Darnold and now the Baker trade. They also traded for C.J. Henderson and Stephon Gilmore. We got to get some assets back. So I could see one of these 2 guys being on the move, whether it's to Cleveland or somewhere else. It feels like it'd be pretty silly for either of these teams to hold on to players that are just rotting away at their bench here. So why the Browns? Here's why. And I've talked about this before on the show. And if you're a routine watcher, you've seen this graphic before. God forbid something happens to Cooper or DPJ. I have no faith in David Bell or Anthony Schwartz stepping up to be wide receiver 2. Bell has had some good moments, right? He had 2 big grabs against the Falcons, for example. Schwartz has just been off on an island, right? Since week 1, he's hardly gotten any sort of look or target whatsoever. So for that reason, if the Browns are so dependent on Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, to me, that tells me that they are 1 injury away from being in deep doo-doo. And it's not like Denzel Mims or Marshall could come in here and fill their void, but at least that could bring in some more competition and let it rise to the top and just get more depth at a spot where you are already very thin at. Now, before we look at some other trade targets on today's show, I got to tell you guys about BetUS. That is today's proud sponsor, and they have an awesome deal for the dog pound. When you go to chatsports.com/bet and you use promo code Browns125, they're going to give you a 125% deposit bonus. What does that mean in English necessarily? Let's say you deposit $100. They're going to give you an additional $125 on top of it. You can make all of your bets every Sunday at chatsports.com/bet. Promo code Browns125. All right, next trade target / rumor is Daron Payne. This one is more of a rumor, I would say, than necessarily. I know it's a combination. It's a fair combination of a target / rumor. Now, Payne is on the last year of his contract, former first-round pick out of Alabama, go Vols, and the Commanders have been in, or maybe in fire sale mode. They're 1-4. They are played Thursday night against the Bears. We're recording this before then. If they lose, which I think they will, they'll be 1-5, and they might start looking to unload pieces and start planning ahead a little bit. Meanwhile, the Browns, they need an actual defensive tackle like a fish needs water. It's that bad up front for Cleveland. Here's where I stand on Payne. This has been a very popular name in Brown circles. I would love it for the right price because I don't think Andrew Berry is all that interested in giving up, I wouldn't say a king's ransom because that's not the player level that Payne is, but giving up a good chunk for a player like Daron Payne who's on the last year of his contract and they might only have 10-ish games of control over here. Now, Payne this year so far, 18 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Pro Football Focus has him ranked 63rd out of 122. He would be number 1 on the Browns by about 30 spots, about 20 spots above Taven Bryan. He would be an immediate improvement. The only question I have is, one, how big of an improvement would he be for Barry to maybe, I wouldn't say swallow his pride, but kind of raise the white flag and go, I got the defensive tackle position wrong. I got to go up and give up a bit of an arm, maybe not a leg, to get someone like Payne. And also, do the Browns have plans of extending him after trading for him? Because if not, if you're just going to play him for the next 10 games, I don't think he's worth a 3rd or 4th round pick. I think the Browns would rather hold on to that here. Now, we've looked at wide receivers, and we have looked at defensive tackles so far. What do you think is the bigger need for this team? Is it wide receivers or defensive tackles? Now, before we show you this last name, we're going to kind of tease you guys into it here. I want you to get your votes in down below in the comment section. I broke my rules. We're going free agency. I had to get him in here. It's Ndamukong Suh, baby. You don't have to trade for him. You don't have to give anything up. Like so many of you guys have said, why trade picks away for a defensive tackle when you can just sign Ndamukong Suh, likely to the vet minimum? Suh has had interest in the Browns. It's not been mutual, but the Browns did sign a defensive tackle. I'm trying to come down to earth a little bit right now because I think in signing Ndamukong Suh, at least seeing if he's in shape, is worth the day. Bring him in for a workout. See where he's at. If he's been looking like Globo Gym Mike What's-His-Face from the end of Dodgeball, Mike White, is that his name? Yeah. Then you don't have to do it. But maybe take a look. Now, the Browns did make a move earlier this week, and I probably didn't give enough coverage like I should have. They brought in defensive tackle Tyeler Davison. Had some years with the Saints and then with the Falcons, 7 years altogether. He accumulated 216 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. I like that they're making some sort of move here because staying still with the same 4 defensive tackles was not going to cut it. I don't think Tyeler Davison is going to come in here like John Fox and save the day. I don't think he's that caliber of a player. I think he can just provide you another guy to look at and go, we have a new player to our rotation. He's on the practice squad for now. I bet he gets promoted to the active roster somewhat soon. May not be this Sunday, but it will be, I'm guessing, by at least next Sunday because a change has to be made right now. Now, here's where I stand. Andrew Berry. I like him as a GM. Is he flawed? Yes. There's no GM that nails every single draft pick, that nails every single free agent signing, that nails every trade. That doesn't exist. Just because he makes bad moves doesn't mean he's a bad GM. Bill Belichick has horrible draft picks, for example. Right? Now, him skimping out defensive tackle this offseason, waiting until round 4 to get one, not really doing anything in free agency outside of signing Taven Bryan, that might be this team's downfall. Because so much stress and such an Achilles heel has been magnified at this defensive tackle position that teams are just abusing it and having their way with third stringers from the Falcons to the worst run game in the Chargers. That might be this team, and I mean like 2022 Cleveland Browns downfall if they fall too far behind because of this run defense, that they don't allow Deshaun Watson to be that hero and come in and take over a 6-5 or even a 5-6 team and lead them to the playoffs. This isn't a Super Bowl or bust season, but clearly a regression from the two Maliks last year, which were, I would say as a duo, probably like 20th to 23rd in the NFL. Now the Browns probably have the 32nd best duo between Elliott and Bryant. Maybe 31st. I don't know who's worse than them. There's probably another word. The Lions. The Lions suck. So that would probably be the worst one right there. So Spam93, last call of the show here. If you want to see Ndamukong Suh in brown and orange.